Framework, the name game. This is the story of the most successful mistranslation in Western culture. We're tracking how one Hebrew word for pit accidentally became the crowned king of hell's locust army, confused with a Greek god, and then got reinterpreted as either Satan, the Antichrist, or Jesus, depending on who's reading. It's linguistic chaos that spawned 1,000 nightmares, and every translation made it worse, or better, depending on your taste for apocalyptic monsters. In the oldest parts of the Hebrew Bible, around the 6th century BCE, the word Abaddon appears exactly 6 times. It's not a person. It's not even really a place with geography. It's closer to an idea, destruction itself, the void where things cease to exist. The book of Job pairs it with Sheol, the shadowy underworld where the dead sleep. Sheol is naked before God. Abaddon has no cover. Picture it like cosmic real estate listings for oblivion. Sheol and Abaddon side by side, neither hiding anything from divine sight. Proverbs declares that Sheol and Abaddon are never satisfied, the same way human eyes never stop wanting more. Its personification the way we say death comes for everyone. Poetic, vivid, but still an abstraction. Then something cracks open in that abstraction. The Dead Sea Scrolls, written centuries later, start calling it the Sheol of Abaddon, and describe torrents of Belial bursting into Abaddon. Now the pit has texture, fire, perhaps water, definitely torment. Jewish texts like the biblical antiquities still treat it as real estate in Gehenna, one compartment among many where the damned suffer. Some rabbinical legends go further. Abaddon becomes a realm Moses visits during a mystical journey, a place where souls lie in fire and snow simultaneously. The word is gaining substance, thickening from noun to location, from metaphor to destination. But it still hasn't grown eyes or hands. It's still a where, not a who. That changes forever around 95 CE, when John of Patmos sits on an island prison off the coast of modern Turkey and writes the book of Revelation. He's thinking in Hebrew and Aramaic, but writing in Greek, and he needs to name something the biblical tradition has never quite named before, the commander of the locust army from the abyss. These aren't ordinary locusts. They have human faces with long hair like women, teeth like lions, wings that sound like chariots thundering into battle, iron breastplates, and tails tipped with scorpion stingers that inflict agony for 5 months without killing. They answer to a king, an angel of the bottomless pit, and John writes, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon. Then he adds the Greek, Apollyon. It means destroyer, a straightforward active participle of the verb apollimi, to destroy, to ruin, to lose. But here's where everything tilts sideways. To Greek-speaking audiences across the Roman Empire, Apollyon doesn't just mean destroyer. It sounds uncannily like Apollon, Apollo, the god of plague, prophecy, archery, and divine retribution. Apollo, who sent plague arrows into the Greek camp at Troy. Apollo, who flayed Marsyas alive for daring to challenge him. Did John intend this resonance? Some scholars argue he's making a deliberate jab at Roman emperor worship, since Domitian associated himself with Apollo. Others think it's coincidence amplified by nervous translators. Either way, the echo sticks. A Hebrew word for a pit now wears a Greek god's face. Jerome catches this linguistic grenade in 405 CE while translating the Bible into Latin for the Vulgate. He writes Abaddon in Hebrew, Apollyon in Greek, and then adds, unprompted by the original text, in Latin, exterminans. The exterminator. Jerome's not just translating, he's clarifying, or maybe intensifying, folding in the full violence of the term. The Douay-Rheims English Bible centuries later keeps this triple naming. A king, the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek Apollyon, in Latin exterminans. 3 languages, 3 shades of annihilation, one figure who now unquestionably has agency and royal authority. Medieval Christianity runs wild with this. Manuscript illuminators across Europe depict Apollyon as a chimeric horror. Dragon wings, scaled body, clawed feet, sometimes breathing fire, always crowned. He's the visual opposite of angelic beauty, the anti-Michael. In the 11th century Song of Roland, an epic poem about Charlemagne's wars, Apollyon gets dragged into fiction as part of a bizarre trinity the poem attributes to Muslim worship: Mahund, a corruption of Muhammad; Termagant, a made-up deity; and Apollyon. Medieval Christians genuinely believed Muslims prayed to a demon god named after the destroyer. The confusion metastasizes across cultures. Abaddon becomes shorthand for ultimate otherness, theological enemy, the crown prince of hell's armies. Then, in 1678, a Baptist preacher named John Bunyan publishes The Pilgrim's Progress from his jail cell in Bedford, England. His protagonist, Christian, encounters Apollyon in the Valley of Humiliation, and Bunyan describes him in meticulous, nightmarish detail, clothed with scales like a fish, wings like a dragon, feet like a bear, a mouth like a lion, and out of his belly came fire and smoke. They fight for half a day. Apollyon straddles the entire path, blocking Christian's way to the celestial city, hurling flaming darts and taunting him for abandoning his service. Christian wins by stabbing him with the sword of the Spirit, and Apollyon spreads his dragon wings and vanishes. This scene burns into English-speaking consciousness like a brand. The Pilgrim's Progress becomes the second most printed book in English after the Bible for 3 centuries. Generations grow up internalizing Bunyan's Apollyon as the definitive image of demonic opposition: physical, aggressive, monstrous, personal. Gustave Doré's 1850s engravings amplify it further, showing Apollyon as a towering cosmic horror with bat wings blotting out the sky. The pit has fully become a person. The person has become a cultural icon. But who is this person? Christianity fractures over the question. In 1708, Protestant commentator Matthew Henry publishes his exhaustive Bible commentary and identifies Apollyon as the Antichrist, the human figure of ultimate evil prophesied to oppose Christ at the end of history. The Jameson Fawcett Brown commentary in 1871 doubles down. It's Satan himself, the adversary commanding hell's forces. These interpretations dominate evangelical Protestantism for generations. The destroyer must be God's enemy. Anything else seems inconceivable given the symbolism. Then in 1922, the Jehovah's Witnesses publish a radically different reading. They point to Revelation chapter 20, verses 1 through 3, where an angel descends from heaven holding the key to the abyss and chains Satan for 1,000 years. If this angel has authority over the abyss, he works for God, not against him. The Witnesses conclude Abaddon is another name for the resurrected Jesus, executing divine judgment by binding evil. The Methodist Interpreter's Bible agrees. Abaddon is an angel not of Satan but of God, performing his work of destruction at God's bidding. Suddenly the destroyer is the hero. The contradiction is irreconcilable, and it exists because Revelation itself is ambiguous. The text says the locusts are commanded not to harm anyone with God's seal on their forehead, implying the destruction is targeted, controlled, part of divine plan rather than cosmic rebellion. But the imagery is so grotesque, the violence so extreme, that centuries of readers couldn't reconcile a good angel presiding over scorpion-tailed tormentors. They needed Abaddon to be villainous. The text doesn't demand it, but the aesthetics do. This tension makes Abaddon irresistible to modern storytelling. Video games, novels, comics, and films resurrect him constantly because he's theologically unstable, powerful but uncertain, monstrous but potentially righteous, ancient but endlessly remixable. In the Darksiders video game series, Abaddon is a fallen angel whose corruption drives the apocalypse. In Supernatural, he's a demon locked in hell's deepest pit. In Good Omens, the name gets a comedic nod as one of hell's bureaucrats. Every version reflects a different theological interpretation baked into 2,000 years of translation telephone. Trace it backward, and the whole edifice rests on that moment in Revelation, when John of Patmos decided to translate Abaddon into Greek as Apollyon, instead of just transliterating the Hebrew. If he'd written Abaddon in Greek letters and moved on, we'd have a word Christians vaguely associated with destruction but no crowned king, no locust army commander, no wings and scales and fire. The act of translation, the choice to render meaning rather than preserve sound, created a new mythological entity from linguistic raw material. And the translations kept compounding. Every language added texture. Latin gave him extermination. English gave him bunion scales and belly fire. German, French, Spanish, each tradition built their own Apollyon from the same blueprint, like sculptors working marble deposits from the same quarry but carving radically different statues. The original Hebrew Abaddon becomes unrecognizable, buried under centuries of artistic and theological sediment. Even the original context in Job and Proverbs gets reread backward through Revelation's lens. When Job says Abaddon has no cover, modern readers picture the crowned angel rather than the abstract void. When Proverbs warns that Sheol and Abaddon are never satisfied, we imagine a hungry entity rather than an inexhaustible state of destruction. Revelation colonized the older texts, rewriting them in apocalyptic grammar. Stand in a museum gallery and watch Abaddon's visual evolution. 12th century manuscripts show him as a crowned figure with minimal detail, more symbol than character. By the 16th century, Hieronymus Bosch-style nightmare creatures proliferate. Hybrid beasts with impossible anatomies, organs exposed, surrounded by tortured souls. The Romantic era makes him sublime and terrible, a force of nature in demonic form. The 20th century gives him power armor, glowing eyes, CGI particle effects. Each era's Abaddon reflects that era's fears. Medieval Christendom feared heresy and invasion, so Apollyon becomes a Muslim false god. Victorian Protestants feared institutional corruption, so he becomes the Antichrist. Postmodern pop culture fears cosmic meaninglessness, so he becomes a video game boss offering existential dread in loot drop format. But underneath every depiction, the same weird truth. This started as a word for a pit, an empty place, a hole in the ground where things fall and don't come back. 6 appearances in Hebrew scripture, always lowercase, always abstract. Then, one bilingual author in a Roman prison needed a name for an angel, reached for his vocabulary, and accidentally invented one of Western culture's most enduring monsters through nothing more than the act of translation. The theological arguments about whether Abaddon is Satan or Jesus will never resolve because Revelation doesn't provide enough data. The text is apocalyptic literature, genre that trades in symbols, not systematic theology. It gives us a crowned figure commanding locusts, holding keys to the abyss, never explicitly aligned with or against God in that scene. Every interpretation since is projection, readers filling the gap with their doctrinal frameworks. The Catholic tradition leans toward demonic. Jehovah's Witnesses lean toward divine. The text itself just sits there, bilingual pun intact, generating infinite interpretive possibilities from 60 Greek words. And that's why one mistranslation, if we're even calling it that, spawned 1,000 nightmares. Because John of Patmos didn't just translate. He created. He took the linguistic raw material of Hebrew destruction vocabulary, filtered it through Greek divine retribution semantics, added apocalyptic imagery of insect armies and abyss keys, and produced something that didn't exist before. A name that sounds like a god, means destroyer, and refers to a king of the pit. Every language that touched it afterward added layers. Every artist who drew it made theological arguments with their brushstrokes. Every preacher who identified him as Satan or Antichrist or Jesus was continuing the creative act, building the mythology brick by brick. Walk through 2 millennia of Christian art, and you're walking through the biography of a word. Start at the pit, end at the crowned destroyer with dragon wings. Between them, scribes and translators and illuminators and poets and theologians, all collaborating unknowingly on a single cultural project, personifying oblivion, giving annihilation a face, making destruction into something you can fight or worship or fear as a character rather than a concept. Abaddon, Apollyon. Exterminans. The angel who was a place, who was an idea, who became a king. One of history's most successful acts of theological imagination, built entirely from the gap between languages, the space where meaning shifts and monsters are born.